Teaching is hard, and oftentimes it isn't what happens in the classroom that makes the job difficult. It's what happens before and after school, during passing periods, at lunch, in meetings, or in our lives outside of school that challenges our ability to stick with the profession. TeacherGuard is committed to focusing on making teaching sustainable and enjoyable. We want to make the rewards of the profession seem more attainable and the challenges more bearable. Our mentorship model pairs teachers with consistent daily support from a peer educator. Through TeacherGuard's 4 sustainability principles, we will walk the challenging times with you and allow you to enjoy the wins and celebrations that come with this beautiful profession. See teacherguard.net for more information and to explore how you can join our community of educators today. We hope you enjoy today's podcast. All right, welcome back. I want to welcome Mr. Tomas Aurelio Davis to the show today. Thank you so much for being here, man. I really appreciate your time. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing wonderful. It's great to see you, Adam.
So let's start off just by telling me a little bit about yourself, or telling our listeners a little bit about yourself. You have quite a broad range of things you've done in your career, starting obviously in the classroom and then venturing off into a bunch of different pursuits. So just tell us a little bit about how you arrived at where you are today.
Sure, it's been a great journey for me. I've been blessed actually to be able to have the career I've had in education, and education obviously has been, very a big part of my success, and so I just stayed with it. I was one of those teachers who always was entrepreneurial. I really didn't want to have the school provide me any money. So I would try to raise my own funds to do things I wanted to do in my biology class, right? So I was 15 years as a high school biology class, and 8 of those years in a bilingual program. So I was teaching biología in Espanol to level 1 kids right across the border when I was teaching at Sweetwater High School District in San Diego, where I'm from. So uh, I co-authored this Eisenhower grant to restructure all of our middle schools in the district. And from that experience, I was offered a position in the private sector to go work in that area. And I said, nah, I'm not into that. I'm not into that stuff. And make a long story short, 35 years later, I left the school district to be in the ed tech world. So I've been doing that. And in the last 10 years, I've really been fortunate enough to be able to give back now to the communities by serving on these nonprofit boards. So I'm on a number of boards that I really want to be on. One is obviously the Center for Educational Innovation. So I'm always interested in innovative things that will impact teaching and learning, right? And then the Classroom of the Future Foundation. We're looking at bringing more businesses in to help support schools because we can't do it by ourselves. We need to have the private sector involved with us in the education of our kids. I'm on the board for Computers to Kids San Diego, where we take in old computers and refurbish them and give them back to Title I families, which is great work. I'm on the board for Project Tomorrow, which does research, which is very important, I think, and impact studies on the impact that programs are having on our students and families. And then really like trying to find ways to generate more funds, through scholarships for kids to give back to the community. And I'm working on a couple of big projects right now. We're building a respite center for families with autistic kids up in Vista. We're working on that project. And I'm working on a project to bring a biotech center down to the South Bay of San Diego and get more kids, our kids interested in the career of biotechnology, which is huge here in San Diego because we have over 1,000 biotechs, but less than 7% of the people working in the jobs there are Black or brown. So I'm trying to change that. That's kind of been doing the last 35 years.
I can't even imagine what your calendar looks like nowadays with everything that you just
Fact.
mentioned you're
But
doing.
you know what though? I have to keep myself. I told my wife, I just got to keep myself busy because I can't sit around. I got to maybe 10 good years left to make an impact in my life, right? So I got to carve some time off purgatory. So I'm trying to get back right now, so I can spend maybe 10 years in purgatory.
Well, I appreciate you carving out some time to join me today, and I'm excited to have you for multiple reasons. The first is, even though Teacher Guard focuses heavily on teacher sustainability and keeping teachers in the classroom, what you have to share with us today applies to students primarily and the support that we can give them to keep our students engaged, to better the relationship that they have with teachers, and in a way, that makes life easier for teachers, right? And so I'm really excited about the two things that we're going to discuss today. And I kind of want to get started The one that was really impressive to me was the Immersive Classroom. So can you talk a little about that company and that project and what they're bringing in classrooms?
Yeah, so I had the good fortune of meeting Rhonda Farber, her husband Scott, last year doing some work in the publishing area, and they were introduced to a company called Immersive Reality USA, and they basically what they're doing is transforming classrooms into these immersive environments where the walls become interactive. So through the use of high-end laser projection systems and surround sound and these touch points, you take an average classroom, actually it's about a 14 by 14 room or a 20 by 20 room, and you can actually make the walls interactive so kids can go in there and experience without the headsets, the VR headsets or the goggles. Groups of kids can go in there and experience virtual field trips to museums around the world, or they can go inside the cell, or they can go to Mars. Very cool technology. Very, very cool. Immersive Reality USA, check it out. The way I would use it as a teacher would be either as the beginning of a lesson to get kids excited about what they're going to learn, or at the end as a capstone project to kind of recap what they did and understand what they do. And then now it comes with these 3D cameras that are about $300 now at Costco, so you can empower kids to go out and tell their stories, go out and shoot their own films and then showcase it in these rooms. So that's the exciting part for me is the kids can now get involved with this and start storyboarding their own stories and do capstone projects that teachers want them to do with their own 3D cameras that look like a cross between an iPhone and a GoPro.
Wild. And so you're capitalizing on the fact that students are already drawn to technology, right? They're drawn to being on their phones and being on their screens as frequently as they can. But now instead of fighting that, you're kind of thinking, how can we leverage that natural impulse uh, to engage them in a lesson that they otherwise may not have been interested in? So maybe talk a little about that, about what is it about an experience like this that can make kids realize or at least stop asking that question of when am I ever going to use this or why is this applicable or why does this merit my attention more than me talking to my friends on my phone.
I really think it goes back to the skill sets they will learn going through without really knowing that they're learning how to do it, right? They're going through a bunch of really cool things. Storyboarding is about a lot of writing. If you have storyboarding a concept, right, and you're building something out, you have to storyboard it. And since I was a bio guy, I really believe totally in the scientific procedure. If kids understood that, you could solve any problem in the world, understanding the scientific procedure, and kids don't use that very much. It's like computational thinking, right? How to take a big problem and chunk it up into smaller problems and then solve the bigger problem by taking small chunks, right? That's kind of what we got kids to understand. So I think if kids can understand how to use a creative medium to take those skill sets they learn from that environment to a non-creative environment, like maybe they take it to a car dealership or where career they're going to be into. As long as they have those skill sets to understand how to think critically, to communicate, and more importantly, that I learned a couple weeks ago from listening to the podcast around Anthropic, and the new president of that group talks about what she looks for when she hires people. She looks for people that are empathetic. She looks for people that like other people, that can communicate well, and also that can think critically and be computational thinkers and solve problems. She doesn't look at paper anymore. She doesn't look at
Hmm.
PhDs or BAs or whatever. She looks at those kinds of factors. And the fact that she majored in literature from Berkeley, and she runs Claude, which is the next iteration of AI, which I think is better than anything else out there. So those are the kinds of skill sets we need to get kids to understand, and they're doing that hopefully by something they're engaged in that they don't really know they're learning about, but they're doing it.
Yeah, and I would argue that they use what is strong in this particular generation of students is the very first step of the scientific method, which is asking questions. They have questions and they're thinking about questions all the time. I think where we're falling short is they ask questions and then they go to Google right away, or they go to some sort of, use the internet to try to find the answer. And as a result, who knows if the answer that they're getting is valid, right? They're skipping through the rest of the steps of the scientific process. The idea of making a hypothesis, generating an experiment, sharing your knowledge with others, and something like the immersive classroom could bring those elements into it, where they're also then deepening the relationship with their teacher, which then further keeps them engaged throughout the school year, making everybody's lives easier.
That's the theory, I think it makes a lot of sense, and the fact that we have these resources available to us as we go deeper down this road, we talked about it earlier, Adam. We've got to be more human. We've got to figure out ways to connect with kids more deeply, and I think that's the important part. And I tell people all the time, if I was to go back to the classroom, I would lead with social emotional strategies. I would lead with who is Adam Ramirez? Who are you? Before I could teach you anything, I want to know who you are, how to motivate you. So I would really change my whole practice around doing that first. And I think every teacher should to learn from that. And I really think the other part, just since we're on the teacher part right now, real quick, is we've got to go back to school. Teachers got to go back to school, understand the science of learning and metacognition. That's really important. I don't think teachers take enough time in our schools of education are putting out kids to understand that. How do kids learn? That's our job as teachers. We got to figure out how kids learn, how best to motivate them, and how the science of learning can be a part of that. And metacognition, just understanding how people learn and how I learn, is really important for us as educators. We need to go back to school and learn how to do that. I think, the ones that are still in the classroom.
Well, I think about just the teacher preparation programs, right? It takes what, almost a decade to become a doctor, uh, multiple years to become a lawyer, and you can get a teaching credential in 1 year. And so to assume that you're going to learn everything that you need to do to know how people learn and how people engage with each other in 1 year, on top of all of the nuts and bolts of that go into the credentialing program, I think that just speaks more to the urgency that we have to get teachers credentialed than it does to, are we really preparing them to step into the classroom and nurture those minds, right?
100%. And now here's the issue for me. I can definitely tell you that my first year I sucked as a teacher. I was terrible.
Same. Yeah.
We were terrible. It took me 7 years to get I think to be a pretty good teacher. It took me 7 years to get what I thought was, being capable and understanding what I was doing, because that's why I think the supports we need to wrap around more, brand new teachers, and we don't give a lot. They're on an island out there, and that's why we lose them. They don't feel supported. And we're overwhelming them even more with more burdens, more things we have to. So they're not leaving the school systems because of pay. They're getting paid pretty well, but we're overburdening them. We're giving them too many things to do, and they're getting tired and burned out.
Well, and then the really good ones, right, are folks that excel in teaching. You typically, if you excel in teaching, you typically are very personable. You can work with people, you read people well, which then also makes good characteristics for administrators. So some of our best teachers we pull and we make them administrators because there aren't a ton of leadership pathways that don't lead to administration, right? And the second you step into administration, you're a manager of people now. Uh, it's tough to do both, to be a manager and to also be a pedagogical leader where you are talking with your teachers about how do we generate inquiry-based lesson plans for our students? How do we establish social emotional learning sequences with them? While also I got to go deal with this HR issue. It's it's tough.
100%. And here's my biggest. I'll tell you straight up. I'll be very transparent with you and your listeners. I never wanted to go into we call it the black hole, the district office. I didn't want to make that leap. I got approached all the time to go to administration. I said, no, my job is to stay with kids. So I think teachers make that decision early on. You're either going to go into administration or you're not going to go into it. And usually you go into administration because you need more money,
Right. Yeah.
right? You have kids and you have a family or a mortgage, right? When you're a young teacher. But I always knew when I got into I was a TOSA, teacher on special assignment when I ran this grant. I got to see that side of it, the political side of the central office. I didn't like it. So I said, I'm going to stay here with kids. So that's why I left. I didn't go into administration. I left to go to the private sector because I didn't want to get involved in the politics of schools as you go up the food chain. You know what I mean? And that's just for me, my personal reason why I stayed in the classroom.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's the hardest thing to do to keep that spirit alive of being there for the kids, being there for the staff when you are out of the classroom. But the best leaders do that, right? And I think that, their sustainability is also a challenge too, because you can only be so much for so many people at any given time.
You got
Um,
it.
and when I'm thinking about the programs that you're talking about and that you support, right? I think about going back to what you said earlier about getting to know the students first. I remember as a first year teacher, I had to warm up for my class. Same thing, I was a science teacher. I had to warm up every day, and there was always a question in the warm up slip that I gave them that was personal. What's your favorite food? How many people help you out with homework at home every night, whatever. And I kept 180 files throughout the year of just facts about my students that I could then throw back into conversations, that I could throw back into practice problems that I designed so that they felt seen. That took an immense amount of time. And so I walked out of my first year thinking like, why do only students in special education have an IEP? Every kid should have their own personalized learning plan. And the second program that I want to talk about today has to do with that, with what if every kid had an AI coach or teacher, almost like a one-to-one aid at their fingertips that they could have uh, to truly navigate school and all of the subjects that they have to learn and all of the standards that they have to meet. So maybe talk a little about that program because I was really excited to hear about it.
Yeah, the program is called NeoMind. It's one of many that's out there. I think you're going to see a whole wave of companies doing that now because they're trying to figure out ways to. It started with all here, right, with the LAUSD debacle now that we're seeing, but it started with the
Mhm,
concept of every kid having their own personalized avatar or tutor that could help them along the way. It was called Ed, right?
mhm,
But a little too early in the development process, couldn't deliver on the back end, obviously. But now you're going to see a lot more companies trying to do this with AI. Neomind being one of them, brand new company out of Brazil. And the concept is there. It makes sense to me. I've always talked about this forever for the last 25 years about how we need to democratize tutoring and make it so every kid has the ability to have their own tutor. Like I could afford it. My son, when he was in high school, struggled with calculus, like most kids do, right?
mhm,
I could afford to pay the $75 an hour for the kid from San Diego State to come and coach him up and mentor him and tutor him, right? A lot of families can't do that, right? So how do you make this equitable for every kid? It's going to be through the technology, through AI tutors, and so this company NeoMind right now is building out, looking for beta test sites right now. So if you have any ideas on who wants to beta test it, put it out there to your teams. We're looking for actual feedback from schools that want to get involved in this and do it the right way. And the piece I think that I keep telling them that they need to understand is I want to see a tutor that looks like me. I want to get into cultural diversity. I want people to look like me, to be my role model as my and I don't want an avatar. I don't want a caricature. I don't want a cartoon. I want somebody that looks like you and me
mhm.
talking to me. That's a role model that looks like me. That's what the advice I'm giving them, among other things, right? Because the more we go down this pathway, the more human we have to be. And some of these avatars now are scary human. They're getting I get amazed by what I see by these groups now. And then more importantly, to your point earlier, how do we embed uh, the social emotional pieces of so you're asking me those kinds of personal questions that help me grow so I understand how you feel today.
Mhm.
What's going on in your life right now, so I can embed that, not just the academic side of it, but the holistic side of what's going on with school. Like if I have a question about, why my dad and mom are getting divorced, that should be part of my conversation because it's going to impact how I feel that day and how I'm going to be ready to learn. Am I hungry
Exactly.
today?
Right.
Those kinds of things are important. We got to build all those kinds of things and human things into this avatar, and then we'll have a pretty good answer. But it's kind of scary in some sense. But the other side of that, the flip side of that for me is most kids, particularly English learners and kids that struggle with special needs, they need a human person on their shoulder. There's got to be a hybrid model here. There's got to be some way to do both because I can understand gifted and talented kids will have no problem learning this way. But what about a kid who's, struggles from the inner city that doesn't have any support at home, never been read to, have no books in their home?
Mhm.
How do we help that kid, get through what they're going to have to go through to learn and get out of that situation? So we got to be thinking about a hybrid model where there's still a place for kids to come and with a human being over this. Because I never forget this. When I was in fifth grade, that fifth grade teacher, she hovered over my shoulder. I felt a warmth sensation there. You know what I mean? I felt like I felt her. I
Absolutely.
just sure that's something you're not gonna get that from an avatar.
I mean, those are the teachers you remember, right? The ones that made you feel a certain way. My favorite teacher of all time, I could tell you maybe on one hand for sure the content stuff that I learned because I don't practice it every day since I left the classroom. But I can tell you every single moment where I felt seen, where I felt appreciated, where I felt like that person cared about me on a human level, regardless of the teacher student relationship. And what I think about with this particular program is just that consistency of presence, right? Whether it's human, whether it's an avatar that looks like me, that speaks like me. The idea is our kids are only in school for a certain amount of time, certain hours a day, and they're only with particularly great teachers that they like for a fraction of that day. So for something like this program that can give them that consistency of support even when they're not there, albeit it may not always be human. I think right now they're getting that anyway. They're getting that presence through TikTok, through social media, that may be AI or maybe people that they're never going to meet in their lives. So this isn't that far away from what they're already experiencing. I think this is just channeling it in a positive direction where it'll affect their schoolwork positively.
If you could give me time back as a teacher, I'm gonna talk to you. If you could give
Yeah.
me time back and give me more time to spend time with my kids and things of that nature, I'm all over it because that's what we're looking at right now. We need to get time back to spend time with kids, whatever that means. Get rid of all like you. I had my kids in biology do a journal.
Hmm.
To your point, I had them write in their journal every day. That was my warm up activity. I had to write a journal. I didn't realize the department people thought I was the department chair, right? I was into the whole reading and writing across the curriculum stuff, and they thought I was crazy because I was taking those 180 booklets home every weekend and with my red pen grading their syntax and grammar and stuff. It took me
Hmm.
hours. You know what I'm saying? It's the same thing that you were doing. It took me hours to get that stuff done, but I did it because the kids benefited from it and they learned how to become better writers in my biology class. Right. But it's something I had to do. For me, it was really good. And it made me understand the importance of relationships because I was one of those teachers that was outside of my class before this whole social emotional thing was happening with with my lab coat on. And I would welcome every kid that would come in. Adab, today we're gonna have a great day today. Every kid that came to my class, when I was outside welcoming him into my class. Nobody taught me how to do that. I just did it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, and I mean, you ask some of the best teachers out there, the ones that are really good at that, hey, how do you get those kids to have a really good relationship with you? They won't be able to tell you because it's stuff that they naturally do. It's the
Exactly.
smile that naturally comes to their face, it's the greeting that naturally comes out of their mouth. Uh, they won't think it's anything outstanding. And sadly, it is. Those are outstanding things that are not common and that teachers need to learn.
So you and I both agree because you're a science guy like me. I had I think I had an advantage over my English teacher friends or my social studies teachers friends because I had props, man. I had animals in my class. I was like my class was like a zoo. And kids they would come, they'd be hanging out all day long in my class because I had animals, I had snakes and I had a vivarium where we had to raise mice to feed to the snakes. The kids did, but
Hmm.
they ran. I had iguanas in there and I had birds and so it was like a zoo. And so I had to shoo kids away. They were there 24/7. They would be there all day long hanging out. It was fun. That's a good problem to have.
It's a great problem. I mean, you seem like the kind of teacher that left their classroom open during lunch and people were
I
packed
did.
in there, I
All the time they're hanging
guarantee.
out, having their lunch in there, man,
But
feeding the animals.
it's those moments that make the teaching easier, right? Those in between passing periods, those lunch times, those before and after schools where people get to know each other again, just as human beings. And all of a sudden, when class starts, their level of attention is that much greater because they know Mr. Davis. They don't just know, oh, that's just my teacher, you
They
know?
used to call me the jirafa because I'm 6'5", right? Here comes a giraffe.
Oh,
Good times, man. I love those kids. Great
it
kids.
yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I wanna talk a little about what you mentioned earlier regarding writing, because I think both students and adults don't do it enough, right? I know that I don't do it enough because the minute I sit down to write just for a little while, my hand starts hurting. But there is something different that happens in my brain when I am handwriting versus typing something. Maybe because it's slower, maybe because occasionally I have to pause. But you think more about what you are putting on paper, versus what you're putting on a Word document or in an email, and that is a skill that we push heavily in teacher guard, the idea of that dynamic journaling where you are writing every single day and you have a mentor that's responding to you every single day. Uh, Part of that is just to get it out of your head so you can go to sleep and you're not thinking about that anymore so that whatever a tough day at work may have been doesn't bleed into your sleep. And then now you're just compounding the problem for the next day. I think that that idea of journaling, that idea of just writing more is as valuable for students as it is for teachers. What do you think about that?
No argument here. I mean, keep that going, man. I think that's the way of the future for us now as we get more involved in AI and down that road because AI will make you lazy. It'll make you lazy. You don't it's easy to just pick your phone and get what you need right there, right? So the role of the teacher is going to have to change. And I think what you're said, there's tons of research out there, Adam, about what you just said around putting pen to paper and making that transition into your brain and where it goes. There's a ton of research out there on that. That's why I think more and more parents, at least because you and I basically are products of a liberal arts education. I think we're going to have to stay with that now. The more and more we go down this rabbit hole of technology and AI, is that we're going to need more schools of education and more colleges and trade schools to be able to have kids give a more liberal approach to understand what's out there in terms of the liberal arts, right? So as a parent, I would love my kid to be able to go back and learn how to write cursive. They can't
Yeah.
write. My kids can't write. They print.
Oh
Right?
boy.
They can't
Yeah.
write, man. We gotta let's teach them how to write back in cursive. That's a lost art. They can't
Hmm.
do it.
Yeah.
Remember calligraphy? Man, people could write that. I thought those guys were awesome, man. Calligraphy, look at that. That's so cool the way that looks. But so that kind of stuff, back to basics, man. I think parents are gonna want more of that. Less screen time, 20 minutes max on a computer or phone, whatever it is, if they have them. But let's get back to the fundamental stuff, talk about micro schools and smaller class sizes and doing things in collaboration with each other. I think that's going to be the future. I think the parents are going to really want. At least the parents that I talk to want to kind of go back. My son's one of those. He's one of those. He wants to go back to the basics.
Hmm. Well, and this idea of slowing down, right? I think that we are always in this constant fight against time and trying to do things as quickly as possible and move forward as quickly as possible. And yet I sit back and I think about the issues that I was talking about with education 10 years ago. We still haven't solved them. So, regardless of moving at the speed of light, we haven't gained traction towards what we need to fix. And so, what a radical idea to, hey, what if you take it slower? What
Yeah,
if
take it slower. I love it.
you
Take it
know,
slower. Get rid of the seat time stuff. School's broken right now. And we have to be transparent. That doesn't work for kids anymore. We're doing in pockets. We're doing great things, but in isolation, nobody's really doing the common thing. We're still built on the agrarian model that we had 100 years ago, and we haven't changed. And we had an opportunity to change during the pandemic, and we didn't do it. We went back to the status quo, which upsets me. That was a chance to really make school different, and we didn't do it.
do you remember, like, I can remember back to 2020 when people were saying, wow, school will never be the same again. Like, we're going to change all of this. And I'm sitting back where we are now, and like, you could tell me it's 2019, and we are right
100%.
back to where we were.
I don't know what that is, man. It's just like it's the cangrejo effect, where instead of
Guess
pulling the
so.
crabs out of the bucket, we pull them back down into the bucket. I
Yeah.
don't get it. Why we're status quo? We can't. We got to bust out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of fear, I think, is what keeps us where we are.
And
Um,
that's one of the problems. I'll just make a general statement too, and no disrespect to teachers because I love teachers that are the most important person in the room, but we get set in our ways and we get a little bit too, we're not risk takers. Most teachers are good people, but they don't take risks. They're not entrepreneurial. We got to start changing that mindset to become more entrepreneurial in our classrooms and in our lives and taking risks. I took a risk, I had to have some guidance to get out there and do it and change my career and go into something I didn't know anything about. Sometimes you have to do that. Yeah, but I was one of those teachers, like I said, I always had my own funding source. I always had money to buy my animals. I didn't bother the administration. I was always raising my own money.
yeah. I mean, and those are those healthy risks, right? That's another thing that Teacher Guard kind of really pushes the idea of risks don't have to be reckless. It doesn't mean that you have to, leap out there and not have a backup plan if what you're trying to do doesn't work out. And I think as teachers lose that, I don't know if it's an innocence, I don't know if it's that hero complex that a lot of people go into teaching with. it starts fading as you get deeper into teaching in terms of your 5, 10, 15 years, and as tenure becomes secure, and as you start eyeing retirement, you start seeing the benefit that just cruising by can bring to your family financially over time. And so that's where I think companies like the two that you spoke about today and the resources that can come into the classroom can reignite that flame that was there for teachers early in their career.
You know what? That's the most important thing we learned from this grant we wrote back in the 90s. It was called Project Thematic Inquiry, where we took our middle schools and had them go through quadrants. We did Socratic teaching and education. We had computer banks, we had cooperative learning strategies, and we had labs where kids did hands-on things, and we rotated kids around. And great concept, but we burned teachers out. We burned them out. They got tired of doing that. But where I'm going with that is that we have to get teachers to think more entrepreneurially, I think, because that'll transfer to the kids. Because here's the ultimate thing that I always talk about, and I preach about this all the time, is we need to have more kids become entrepreneurs, to go back to the community that they grew up in as a CEO of a company to create jobs. That's how we're gonna get out of these cycles of poverty. We gotta get more CEOs of companies that will come back to our community, be willing to hire 20 people from the community and create more jobs. That should lead to peace and tranquility forever if we do that. So if we can get teachers to understand their important role as role models and as entrepreneurs and get kids to understand the entrepreneurial spirit, hopefully they'll come back to their community as a CEO and create jobs. That would be the ultimate,
Full circle moment.
100%.
Well, if people are interested in learning more about either the Immersive Classroom or NeoMind, we'll toss some links to both of their programs in the description for this video, both on YouTube and in the podcast description. But is there any other place other than their websites that they can go to find out more, or any contacts that you feel like people can reach out if they're interested in bringing this to their schools?
They can reach out to me at Tom Davis, tdavis at thecei.org, which is the Center for Educational Innovation. And I'm happy to share, that's kind of my job. My role is to share, innovations in teaching and learning that will move the needle to all the people in my circle and all the network. That's kind of what I do for right now. So when I see something that's going to be really innovative, it's going to make an impact, I get it out to all my people. So I'm happy to share that with you and everybody else.
Excellent. And I try to wrap up the podcast by asking my guests always if there is, in one or two sentences, one thing that comes to mind that you could say to a teacher in their third or fourth year who is thinking, I'm burned out, this profession is not for me, I'm thinking about changing careers. What would you say to them?
That's a great question, because it happened to me. Like I said, after the 7th year, I got tired. I wanted to look at something else, but then I came back. I left for a year. I went to Motorola, and I left for a year, and I just said, "I don't like this corporate world. I'm gonna go back and have an impact with kids." I think it happens to you at some point. You think about it, but, you gotta figure out what your calling is. It's a calling. Teaching is a calling. You don't go into it for the money. Right? You're not doing it for the money and but eventually the reason why I left was because of money. I didn't have enough to get the things I wanted. So it's a shame that has to happen. So to all the transitioning educators out there, I would just say, uh, look at your vision and your mission for your life, because I knew going out of college, I was going to go in and give back early. I wanted to go give back to my community. So I went back like Mr. Cotter did and taught at my school where my mom went to school. It was cool, man. I loved it. I went back to where I grew up and gave back to that community for 8 years. Now, later on in my life, I started thinking about, buying my house and getting a car and having kids and all that stuff. I gave back first, and then I'm now starting to get stuff in life that you need to get, right? So it depends. You can do that first or later in your life. Just make that decision, and stay with it, because it's a great career. And if you have the ability like I did to stay in education, stay in it. That's would be my advice. Look at it and then you make your decision, but I would say try to stay in education all you can, because it's the best way to get a lot of emotional feedback, positive feedback, and as well as going to the private sector, make a little more money.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Tom, for joining me. I appreciate your time. For those folks listening, check out the Immersive Classroom, check out NeoMind. Lots of great resources for students out there and for teachers alike. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate you, man.
You're welcome, Adam. Great to see you. Good luck.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it and found it helpful to your teaching journey, please don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube or through your favorite podcast platform. We also appreciate any and all reviews or comments you leave. Thank you for joining us today and tune in next week for our next episode.